So I just want to quickly go over what we'll talk about tonight. I wanted just to provide a little bit of that Ken Burns documentary, just to kind of wet the whistle, and maybe some things that you saw were little nuggets that sparked a seed for something that you want to discuss a little later on. So I wanted to kind of just give you a brief overview of Iowa City Public Library's collection, because that's what I feel a good library does. It takes people from our community and we link people to resources and we facilitate dialogue between our community. Those are my favorite kinds of programs. We'll discuss the movie and then we'll chat with our wonderful University of Iowa athletes. And I know we have some very knowledgeable people here tonight, so we're definitely going to tap into some of those resources. This is where I want to start with the books. So we have physical books, we have ebooks, we have audio books, we have Kanopy, which is a free streaming service. I'm highlighting just a few books from each, I would say, demographic. This is the children's selection. I wanted to, of course, pull in some Jackie Robinson books because it's the theme of tonight, but we have lots and lots. In fact, our story times for little ones all through the month of February have featured athletes, but also other, Black excellence. So you can always check our calendar for those things. Sometimes, there's stories that maybe you wouldn't intuitively know about. And so I kind of wanted to just expand a little bit. But I also wanted to tell you about something we have called staff picks just for you. So if you, for example, call us, you can fill out a form and say, I want to know about baseball. I want to know about the Negro League, the American Negro League. Put me together a bundle. We could definitely go to our collection and put you a bundle together that you can either pick up, or we'll make you a list and you'll put holes on whatever you want. So that option is there. The other thing I also want to stress is if you have a book, it's a new book, we can definitely have it purchase suggested. If it's an older book, we would probably interlibrary loan it. But if you see something that's not in our collection that should be in our collection, we always want to make sure that our collection is responsive to everybody. So call us, send us an email. Young adults. So I'm actually the young adult services librarian. I'm pretty new at Iowa City, but we're doing a lot of work here. So if you're interested in young adult programs, you have ideas for young adult programs, please come to me. Kwame Alexander, his books resonated with a lot of young people. When it first came out, I couldn't keep those books on the shelf at Cedar Rapids. Randy Rabe has a new book out called The Patron Saints of Nothing. He's a Filipino American, and this was his other book after the shot drops. Ghost was actually a book that I wasn't really familiar with, although I was familiar with Jason Reynolds. So I encourage you to check that one out. And then I'm just kind of, again, it's not, I can give anybody the slides, but I'm more important to be tonight. I want to talk to people who are here and have a discussion. So these are some of the Jackie Robinson adult books that we have. Invisible Hawkeyes was something that had a local connection, and so it was African Americans at the University of Iowa during the civil rights. So that had a local spin that maybe people wouldn't know that we would have, but we had that one. So I think I would like to open it up, Rakisha. If we can maybe alternate on questions, and if anybody would like to either make a comment in the chat or just unmute themselves and discuss anything that has come up in their mind, we can definitely start a dialogue now. So to begin with, what did you learn about Jackie Robinson that you didn't know before? If you didn't have a chance to watch the documentary, then that might be a little moot, but even just maybe looking at some of the snippets, was there anything that you didn't know about Jackie Robinson that you learned?
I just had a question really quick. Is this is just open for everyone and not just the panelists, or what's the format?
Yeah, so this part is open for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
I didn't know that he became an activist after leaving the MLB, and I also didn't know that he was like in a business career. I had no idea what happened to him after he played baseball. So it's really cool to learn that he continued to be an activist for social change.
Yeah, great.
We just had a comment in the chat that he was a fierce independent voter. Even back then, he was getting people to vote, which that to this day is still very important to get people to vote, registered and voting.
Yeah, one thing I didn't know that I found out in the documentary was that he originally had voted for he was a proponent of Nixon, and that was something that I wasn't aware of. So for those of you who are just, you know, so well read on Jackie Robinson and you know the man very well, you've learned about him for a long time, do you feel like if you've seen the documentary, did it do Jackie Robinson justice?
I just wanted to jump in real quick because I think that there's a lot that can be said. But I also think that even though Jackie Robinson did fantastic things, I think that what stood out to me were his children and the fact that they were kind of forced to be in a white school. And that's something that really stood out to me because they didn't ask for that, but also the fact that a lot of times we think that these individual people and instances are kind of markers in Black history. And I think even though they're important, we forget that the Negro Leagues existed, right? We don't talk about Satchel Paige, who's from my hometown and played for the Pittsburgh Crawfords, right? We don't talk about how so many of the Negro League players were better than the Major League Baseball players, frankly. And I think that a lot of times we get caught up in one person, like wanting one hero and not kind of looking at the time. So I just wanted to share that too. I also wanted to plug the Jackie Robinson YMCA in San Diego, where I coached basketball at. And Mr. Michael Brunker was able to join us tonight. And I just wanted to offer that as well.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lisa. So until the talking gets going, Lisa, thank you for the invitation to come to this tonight. And I'm on California time, and I've got another meeting at 5, so I can't stay for the whole duration. But if I can real quickly, so I served as the executive director of the Jackie Robinson Family YMCA for 22 years. So I don't want to claim to be an expert on Jackie Robinson, but trust me when I tell you, I think I've learned a lot about the man and what he stood for, and it was bigger than baseball. So we all know he was the first Black man to play Major League Baseball. That happened on April 15th, 1947. And to this day, Major League Baseball keeps that day sacred. That is Jackie Robinson Day forever. And that's the only day that anybody can wear the number 42. And you hear a lot about that. If you saw the movie 42, there was some significance to that too. But this Ken Burns documentary was as good as it gets. You see Jackie in action, you see what he looks like, you hear him talking. And the great thing about this movement too is that he, Rachel was a big part of all that he did. And so he was more than just the first Black man to play Major League Baseball. He's spiritually grounded, he's a family man. You see his children and how they are. Sharon's a good friend of mine to this day. Rachel as well, she's 98 years old right now. But I'm just so happy that she got to see both the movie 42 and this documentary about Ken Burns fulfilled while she was still here to see that. So the activism that I've known about Jackie, and I sent Lisa some letters, and if I could share the screen, I would show them to you, but I won't. But I do have letters, but I put a link in there to the Facebook page at the Jackie Robinson Family YMCA where you can see he wrote letters to 4 presidents, starting with Eisenhower, then Kennedy, then Johnson, and then Nixon. And if you read what he said in those letters, it would blow your mind. And chances are nobody on this call tonight has ever seen the letters written by Jackie Robinson. You've got them now, they're in the chat. But more importantly, in his biography, there's something that he said, and I'm going to end on this because to me, this is probably the most critical piece that that I think we need to be aware of. And so he, let me get this open on my screen so I can read it exactly. So here's what he said. He said that in this biography, he talked a lot about for all the success, Jack felt unfulfilled, or his success stirred in him sharp feelings of guilt about the poor and the sick. His work with the children at the Y, so he worked with the YMCA, during the off season from what he did with the Dodgers. But he talked about how it was too supervised for him. He wanted to see the kids who couldn't get into the Y. I want to try to help where it's needed more. And the people he wanted to help weren't always Black kids. It was all kids. So he was very sensitive to being there for everybody. But the paragraph before this one is really something to take note of. It said by September, he revealed his bat weighed heavily in his hands and his legs were often numb. But the worst pressure was psychological. Quote, the strain of the last 3 or 4 years has done something to me. Not that I have anything to worry about, but I'm jumpy and nervous all the time. And when I read that from him, he died at the age of 56. He wasn't an old man, just like King was assassinated at 39. But I'm telling you, the pressure that Jackie Robinson went through being that first Black man to play Major League Baseball. When he came to New York, he came to Brooklyn, he went to UCLA, for crying out loud. He was, so when people wonder why he was angry or upset, I mean, he knew how to dress, he knew how to act. He played 4 sports at UCLA, and baseball might have been his worst sport. So he was All-American in all these sports. And so he's going from the West Coast to the East Coast and catching all this madness because he was a Black man trying to play baseball. Now think about that. That's a heck of a concept. Imagine going to UCLA and being subjected to death threats and everything else because you were Black playing a white man's game. So with that being said, I think if you get a chance, please look at those letters. I'll put my email in the chat too. If any of you want to see them, have me send them to you. I'll do that for you. But when you read the quotes that are in those letters, and Lisa, I sent the letters to Lisa earlier, and I simply asked her, have you ever seen them? And doctoral candidate Lisa Covington, the answer was no.
No, I had not.
and I tell all of you right now, the chances are you haven't seen it, but when you listen to what he says, and I mean, it's just so, it's powerful. It's absolutely powerful. And I think when you look at these quotes, and here's one right here where he talks about, listen to this. He says, 17 million Negroes cannot do as you suggest and wait for the hearts of men to change. We want to enjoy the rights that we feel we're entitled to as Americans. This we cannot do unless we pursue aggressively goals which all other Americans achieved over 150 years ago. He wrote that on May 13th, 1958 to Eisenhower. I mean, in the last letter he wrote in 1972, this one here is unbelievable. He said here, come on. He said, and this is coming off of what we have seen in America this past summer. Black America has asked so little, but if you can't see the anger that comes from rejection, you're treading a dangerous course. We older Blacks, unfortunately, were willing to wait. Today's young Blacks are ready to explode. We had better take some definitive action, or I'm afraid the consequences should be nation shattering. I hope you will listen to the cries of the Black youth. We cannot afford additional conflict. That was written on April 20th, 1972. He died in October of 1972. So much of what's been said before is so relevant today, but when you put it in the context of young people even having a clue who Jackie Robinson was, who the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, I mean, we know the names, but do we really know what they were, who they were and what they stood for and what they went through? And then to have someone like King say, Jackie Robinson made his work easy. Jackie Robinson raised money for King. He marched with King. He was very active in the civil rights movement with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Thank you so very much for that wealth of information. And thank you, Ms. Lisa, for connecting the pieces there. When she said you were going to be here tonight, I almost like jumped out my seat as I was driving because I was excited about that. But you touched on a lot of things. There's so much information, wealth of information that we don't know because we get the surface level of it. And one thing I can appreciate about Lisa is she always challenges that as well to say, well, do you really know what that meant when it was presented? So I can definitely appreciate that. And I definitely will be looking at those letters as well.
But let me tell you, in fairness to everybody right now too, me growing up in Detroit, which is where I'm from, I didn't get to San Diego until 1980. But growing up as a kid in Detroit, you know, I didn't know about Jackie Robinson. I knew about the Tigers, the Lions, the Red Wings, and the Pistons, right? You just don't know it. And until I went to the Jackie Robinson Family YMCA and just started learning more about him, then I became, you know, very keenly aware of what he did and what he stood for. It was for 22 years there. That came over 22 years of growth and knowing that. And it's how do we look at history? I mean, everybody's celebrating Black History Month, but why is it only in February, right? Why is it Black history celebrated every day so that we can all learn about all the greatness that's gone on in this country for so many years?
Thank you so much, Mr. Brunker, for being here. I know you have another meeting to get to, but I really just think that Jackie Robinson's legacy is in that building in Southeast San Diego, and I'm just really thankful to be a part of that. Even if it was just through, you know, basketball for a few years. So thank you.
So have you been in the new Jackie Robinson YMCA yet?
I have. But this is Iowa. It's cold here. Don't talk about San Diego.
Yeah.
You know, going back to the Ken Burns, there were definitely themes that I saw back then that correlated to today when, you know, there was mention of him being a rabble rouser or insolent and antagonistic, held to a different standard. You had to be twice as good. You know, these were all things that I've heard my friends say today. And so the letter that you read, Mr. Brunker, it just seemed like a prophecy. You know, he could see the writing on the wall, and he said, you know, if we don't pay attention to history, it's going to blow up. And what we've seen on the streets, we see a lot of this playing out. What do you think? What do you think Jackie Robinson would think of his country right now?
I think he'd be highly excited about the youth engagement that's going on right now. Highly excited. He and King would be both highly excited. And this is a challenge I would throw out to the athletes on the call, and I hope we hear from them at some point. But, you know, I came to San Diego in 1980 to coach basketball at San Diego State. So I'm originally from Detroit, coached 2 years with the Detroit Pistons, and then 4 years at the University of Detroit. So I worked with Dick Vitale for ESPN for 6 years. But the key thing is when you look at these letters, when have you ever seen a professional athlete write anything like that to a president? I mean, I mean, in my 68 years, I can't recall it, but an activist at that time from the 1950s till the day he died in 1972, just the way he articulated the needs of the movement and his participation was critical. But for him to today see, and his daughter Sharon as well, they and Rachel, his widow, you know, just excited to see the youth of today so engaged and so active, and that's, they swung on an election. I mean, let's be real. That's the power of the youth. That's what's happened now. But I'll tell you what, from an athlete perspective, the challenge is, can you do more? So if there's student athletes on the call right now, the Hawkeyes, we enjoyed having you out here for the Holiday Bowl last year. You did a great job, won the game. But the question is, what are you doing when you take the uniform off? You know, Jackie went to work. He was a professional businessman, but he stayed engaged with the cause. He stayed engaged with the movement. His wife, Rachel, started the Jackie Robinson Foundation, where they've given out thousands of scholarships to college-bound high school seniors and maintain those scholarships and mentorships throughout their entire college career. Athletes today, what are you doing right now? I just picked up the paper this morning. Fernando Tatis, he signs a 14-year contract for $340 million. And trust me when I tell you, Jackie never made any money like that. It's all relative, I'm sure. But what are the athletes of today doing to be engaged? You know, I think taking a knee during a game and all that, that's all well and good. But what are you doing after you take the uniform off and you go back to your communities to really make an impact? That's what Jackie Robinson was all about. To always challenge people to do more, especially in that quote that says a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives, just like you're doing here tonight. So I applaud you for that.
Rakisha, I think we're gonna have our guest panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about yourselves. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see your beautiful faces. So let me just get off of here.
And also just to mention that Lisa is also on this call as a panelist as well to chime in. I don't know where, Antonio, you may have to help me pronounce her name so we don't mess it up. But where she is, she's not on the, I don't see her on the call tonight.
So. I'm also sure I can't pronounce it as well.
So if you don't mind being, you know, taking the lead on this, Antonio, and just kind of going, and I know that you have been doing some work as an athlete here at the university as well. So we definitely want to hear about that. And in respect to the questions that were already presented to you, as in what happens when you don't have that uniform, because I'm on anymore and you're off the track field, or you know, you're just Antonio, you know, and I'm pretty sure that you can relate to a lot of things that Jackie Robinson faced and other athletes have faced. And we think of the LeBrons and current athletes now, and how they're always told to be silent. You know, you play the sport, but you can't say anything. So we definitely want to hear from you, and Lisa, as a PhD student, your perspective as well, working with some of the athletes and being on the university campus as well. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we have a few questions to kind of guide things, but just talk. That's what we want to do, is make sure that we have a conversation tonight. So go ahead, Antonio.
Okay, so I don't know where to start. Yes, my name is Antonio Woodward. I am on the men's track and field team here at Iowa. I got a degree in criminology, well, my undergraduate degree in criminology with a minor in theater, and I'm currently pursuing an MSW here at Iowa as well. What else? I was born in Florida, Daytona Beach, Florida, and then moved to Rancho Cucamonga, California in 7th grade, 2010, and found my way in Iowa. Didn't know where it was on the US map. I mean, I knew it was by Chicago, but I had no idea where Iowa was on the map. But yeah, it's crazy how life pans itself out, and I had not anticipated on ever coming to Iowa. It was the last school that I visited out of my visits. I wanted to go somewhere where the academics match the athletics. and Iowa seemed to be the best fit. I had some friends from back home in California that had either already committed or were already attending the University of Iowa. So yeah, I took my visit and surprisingly fell in love with it. But yeah, that's me, a piece of me. And any questions that you guys have.
All right, we'll give Lisa an opportunity to introduce herself as well, and then we'll just go back with additional questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Covington. I'm a PhD candidate studying sociology of education, Black history, and digital humanities. I am a lifelong athlete and played basketball most of my life, and then ended up coaching at the Jackie Robinson YMCA with young people from preschool all the way through high school. So I think sports really serve as a way to an outlet really for folks, and also just film, documentaries really provide us with a lens to understand the world that we might not have been a part of. And so I think all of those are just really important as we think about Black history and honor Black history. It's necessary that we are familiar with a lot of this information that we tend to learn in February, but no other time in the year. So I'm just really happy to be here.
Awesome. I know Antonio mentioned that you wanted to find an academic program where the athletics matched the academic portion. Lisa and Antonio, do you both feel like there's still a disconnect between sports and athleticism in universities with the academics that come along with it?
I can only speak to, since I'm not an athlete here, I tutor in athletics and have students who are athletes. But I think that what we see at Iowa is very similar to what we see at other Big Ten schools. We can even just look to the lawsuit, frankly, that has recently happened here at the University of Iowa with football players, right? So I think that as far as athletics and sports, I just kind of go back to William Rhoden's book because he wrote a lot about, the book is called $40 Million Slaves, right? And he's talking about Black professional athletes and kind of this progression from being activists, right? So Jackie Robinson, and then also looking at the NBA and other professional outlets, and like this arc of focusing on the community to all of a sudden it's very individualized, like Mr. Brunker was saying. And so I think that that is encouraged, frankly, at all schools that have college sports. And I think that there's often this this expectation from the school for athletes to just be athletes and student athletes, right? Whereas other folks might view that differently. So I think that there are a lot of things that I could probably say that Antonio might not be able to say, but I think that it's important for us to use like a bigger context, because when we talk about disparities, racism, and discrimination, we know that it's not just a one-off, right? It's not just one place, one area. It's an institutional system, and things work together in order for that to happen. So I think that I'll just stop there, and then would love to hear what Antonio has to say about that as well.
Yes, great points. Lisa, I love when you talk. I remember you came into our my DoD class with Professor Spears. But yes, that's a lot. So one thing that I've realized is with athletics everywhere, it's a business at the end of the day. And navigating through Iowa, I'm just like, and rather have been Iowa or any other school that I might have attended, I'm just like, what is being done for student athletes and to student athletes to feel like they are more than just an asset? Because I'm more than just an asset. Like, I could choose if I wanted to perform or not. You know what I mean? Like, I could walk away from this and like not even do what is expected of me just because I feel like I have the power to do so. And another I could be easily replaced. But like I said, just what is being done to show that you know, we're more than just an asset. And I remember at the beginning of the school year, some teammates and I, prior to starting the committee, a bunch of student athletes just talked about how when, you know, roaming around campus or just like Iowa in general, like they feel the need to, you know, wear their athletic gear to show that they're an athlete because it feels like the shield. So like, you know, if you go walk into a store or just anywhere, like just having that piece of Iowa gear showing that you're a student athlete just like offers like a sense of security to know that like white people that like are looking at us as student athletes are like, oh, like they're athletes, like they aren't just a Black individual, you know what I mean? So like the fact that people feel that we have to wear Iowa athletic gear as a shield to feel protected and safe is sad. It's ridiculous, and yeah, it just frustrates me, but it's the world we live in, unfortunately.
Antonio, you mentioned the committee that you're a part of, which is Speak Your Truth, right? Can you give us a little background about that and how it came about, and you know, kind of what's your vision and mission with that and how things are going with that?
Yes, absolutely. So one second. So last summer, after the murders of several Black individuals, you know, once our season got canceled, like everything was just going downhill, and like nothing was clicking, and like everything was just upside down. And like a lot of us felt uncomfortable, felt frustrated, infuriated, just on edge 24/7. And we all knew that we felt the same way, but like we didn't know where to start. We didn't know how to process. It was a lot to process. Long story short, we like connected with a few of my teammates, Black teammates, and we were just like what are we gonna do about this? Like, what are we gonna do to bring awareness and just speak up and out about what's going on, and that it's a problem and that it's bothering us. Even though even though we weren't directly impacted by it, it still impacts us as Black individuals and student athletes as well. So yeah, my teammate Nia, she called me and they were just talking like for hours on several occasions, and we're just like what do we want to do? Like should we like start like some type of like group, committee, student org, whatever. So essentially we gathered all of our Black track athletes, and we had like a huge Zoom gathering, just unpacking everything, our feelings and frustration, like I said. And we had Coach Roberts, our assistant head coach, or assistant track coach. He kind of facilitated everything as far as like gathering everyone together and deciding on like how we wanted to move forward, basically how to move forward. And basically our mission is just to educate and bring awareness and inform people that yes, all lives matter, but Black lives, with an emphasis on Black Lives Matter, and that we need to cater to the needs of Black lives, and the fact that on paper and historically, it would appear that Black lives do not matter. So obviously focusing on some other marginalized groups as well, but with an emphasis on Black lives. So we've been like we have like weekly team meetings every week, where we will, excuse me, where we'll like have different presentations, guest speakers coming in and talking about the different types of oppression and all that good jazz. We've had meetings with Gary Barta and Barbara Burke, who are our athletic director and deputy director of some long title she has. We've had several meetings with all the grand poobahs of the University of Iowa just to inform them of some of the changes that need to happen. And I'm someone that doesn't like to just sit around and wait for someone to speak up about an issue. Like, I'm very outspoken. I don't bite my tongue about an issue like this. When there's change that needs to happen, I like to speak up about it instead of waiting around for someone else to do it. So my teammate, Alaga Tasaga, her and I are co-chairs for the committee. So we kind of are kind of the persons for the committee. So like I said, just rather it be meeting with Sarah Saunders, who's a director for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, or just like talking to different departments around campus about like implementing certain things into the On Iowa and like athletic seminar and stuff like that. Just like curriculum needs to be changed, and like we've had some of the deans from College of I'm sorry, I don't remember, like environmental sciences or something like that, that would like we met with about shifting their curriculum. Instead of just teaching about dead white old men that have done X, Y, and Z, let's talk about the Black and brown men that have done some things. Let's talk about the Hispanics that have done some things. Like, they aren't the only ones that have moved mountains, you know. So yeah, it's been a journey. It hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of we have so many great ideas that we want to do, but like we just try to like pace ourselves and not get overwhelmed, and like try to start so many different tasks and not end up completing any task because there are so many things that are just in the air, you know. So being mindful of just where we are, what we've done, and where we want to go. Right now, it's just strictly within our athletic or track and field team. And like, there's been conversations and like people asking like if we would like to venture out to like other athletes on campus or whatever, and totally open to that. Just starting from in-home and doing some building a strong enough foundation to prepare us for years to come when I'm not here.
I just wanted to jump in, Antonio, if you don't mind. I think that a lot of what you're talking about is really what so many students are burdened with now, right? It's the expectation that students who transition every 4 to 5 years, right, in college, right, and just are expected to do this labor of professionals. And it's really interesting to me to kind of, as a PhD candidate here, watch this like cycle happen, like basically every 3 years, something's going on. I remember when I first got here, there were some protests and different things in solidarity with the athletes in Mizzou, right, at the University of Missouri. And there were meetings with the vice president of such and such, right, like with Black students for a week. And none of those things have been implemented that were discussed, right? Fast forward to last year, we see at the University of Northern Iowa that students specifically are advocating for themselves and saying, we are here and we deserve to be here. And went to the chancellor's meeting and the police were called and all of these different things. So this is not anything new, right? What Antonio is talking about is necessary work, grassroots work that the athletes decided this is important for us as a community, and that's valuable. But I also want to just draw our attention to the fact that why is it that students are burdened with this responsibility? And it shouldn't be that way. But again, institutional racism tells us that, and I'm also honoring today is Toni Morrison's birthday and Audre Lorde's birthday. And Toni Morrison tells us that anything aside from directly addressing racism is a distraction, right? So when we don't build systems that are equitable, that is inherently racist, right? And inherently not just racist in the fact that it is inequitable towards Black and Indigenous people of color, but in the fact that the entire, like, just like when you go into a building, you wouldn't go into a building without infrastructure. The infrastructure in and of itself is white supremacist in nature. So if I go into the building, right, of the library or any building at the University of Iowa, right, and I know that there aren't things built into the structures to ensure equity, that's a problem, right? What are the Black books that are featured in March? You know, Black women can also be a part of Women's History Month. Surprise, right? So, you know, we really have to think about how to strategically implement a lot of the things that Antonio's talking about, because he's about to be done with his MSW. So then what happens, right? We just wait for another Antonio, we wait for another Nia, right? And that is how institutionally we can see the failure of equity, right, in these particular spaces.
So Lisa, where in your work do you feel like you've had the most meaningful impact in terms of whether it be changing policy or changing procedures or shifting paradigms?
I think that, you know, that's a really good question. I think that a lot of the impact that I focus on is within communities, and kind of empowering parents so that they know what's going on. The work that I do with Black Lives Matter at School, Iowa, and also the National Steering Committee for Black Lives Matter at School, we had a whole week, the first week of February, focusing on how to make sure that there are spaces of equity across the state of Iowa, right, for Black students specifically. So grassroots movements, I'm just taking kind of a cue from the Ella Bakers, the Septima Clarks, right, who did this work before me. And I think all that we can do, we being like people here right now on this call, is really take the lead from Black folks, right? Stop expecting people to volunteer around equity work. You know, I received the email a couple weeks ago, and it was asking me to talk or be present at an event in Iowa. And I said, oh, okay, here are my rates, right, for my hourly talk with it, you know. And then it was just like, oh, well, we actually didn't expect you to want to pay. And I said, you know, my expertise is valuable. So you know, we as a culture, we pay for things that we value. So if we value equity, right, why is it that the University of Iowa is having such a national public difficulties in hiring a diversity vice president? I mean, for the past, I don't know, what, 3-4 years? And I'm not saying this to say anything disparaging about the University of Iowa. It's just an example of a larger system of historically white colleges and institutions that do this work, right? And so note that I didn't say predominantly white institutions, I said historically white, because University of Iowa did not integrate until like the 50s, I believe. So or maybe late 40s. So, you know, we have to think about these structures that we're a part of, that we integrate into, are not built to love us, are not built to treat us with equity. And so the work is not necessarily for me in developing procedures, right? It is teaching Black children that they're valuable, because every day in those schools, they might not be physically harmed, but psychologically, just like Jackie Robinson, right? They are harmed every single day that they don't learn about people who look like them, every single day, that they don't have teachers who look like them and or care about them, right? There are so many different levels to inequity across the spectrum, right? Even when it's just like you're expected to play sports just because you're Black, right? So there's a lot of work that adults need to do, frankly, in answering your question. And I think that the burden is not on young people to always like tell adults what to do. They just do it. And that's what Speak Your Truth is doing. And so along with other organizations, with the Black Student Union, right? House of Lord, right? Honoring queer Black folks on campus. So I think those are the types of things we have to consider. Policy change and all of that is great, but that is not my lane. My lane is with empowering folks who look like me.
And Kylie asked a question, how can community members / alumni show support as allies? Lisa, you touched on that a little bit. Antonio or Lisa, do you have anything more to add to that? Maybe like the alumni community, Antonio, or Iowa City as a community, what can we do to spotlight, enhance, showcase what it is you're doing, bring your issues into the greater community? How could we support you?
There are many answers. There's just one thing. I think the first thing is to do some of the work on your own, not depend and rely on someone of my skin color to like give you the answers and like walk you through it, because it's exhausting and I don't have time for that like all the time. Like just generally speaking, like I feel like sometimes I'm expected to like spoon feed it to someone. So first off, like it's okay to ask questions, but do the work first and then ask questions later. So yeah, just educating yourselves. Like that sounds very cliche, but it's the truth. Like do some of the work on your own. So that's something that could be done. Also just like not making noise and not being like, I'm all for the movement or I'm here for the support when like in the heat of the moment, you know what I mean? Like it shouldn't just be, that support shouldn't just be when like after someone's being murdered. Like that support needs to be consistent. Like it needs to be beyond that, you know what I mean? So instead of like not just posting a blackout picture on social media or just like not just like retweeting, favoriting, or like reposting someone's post, like what are you doing behind the clicking of your fingers and posting a picture or reposting your story, something like that. So like just like building a foundation within yourself to like building up ammo to like be able to like educate yourselves and like distribute that to other people, so people like me aren't just burdened with that. Sorry, that was just off the top of my head. Yeah. Lisa, do you have anything to add?
Great for off the top of your head.
It is. I do. Thank you. I think that, you know, what Antonio is talking about is labor, right? He doesn't like the labor that is expected of Black folks to teach constantly is exhausting, and it is not our responsibility, right, to do that with everybody, especially if it's they're not being compensated for it, or we're not being compensated for it. I think that the work that allies can do is such a great question, because I think taking the lead from Black folks is one, and also donating, right? Like for Black Lives Matter at School Week, we have a Amazon wish list to get items for Black students across the state, right? And I also will add, because Iowa City specifically is the city of literature, right? UNESCO City of Literature, people love to read, which I think is amazing. Clearly, I like to read too. But there's kind of a disconnect, and I see this often in academia, right? Where it's like we love to read and consume and think and theorize, but the application of the work, right? The application of what Dr. King says in his letter from Birmingham jail, right? The information that is in the autobiography of Malcolm X, right? Or in Assata Shakur's autobiography, right? Those are really central to what we're kind of talking about. This is not new, right? Antonio said that earlier, like this is not a new phenomenon. It's just what's new is the attention that people are performing around it, right? There's this kind of a performative Black Lives Matter work that often goes on lately, and it happens in schools. It can be in any kind of place where folks say, oh, okay, yes, this is important, but what's actually changing? How are you valuing Black lives? Are you compensating consultants in your organizations that are Black folks with expertise? Are you going to the city council and making sure that the voices and experiences of Black and Indigenous people of color are represented, even if you don't align with that identity, right? How are you contributing every day? I think that's a piece of it, right? I think also being able to say, hey, my organization or the library or the rec center can offer X, Y, and Z. Would that be helpful to you? Because a lot of times when we ask folks, oh, what do you need? How can we support you? It's kind of just like, I'm not sure right now, but let me get back to you. But if you can offer your resources and reach, I think that's something to start with.
Thank you both for your answers. Yeah. Oh, can you share your Amazon wish list, Lisa? So with the others that's on this call, do you have any questions or comments? I know, Carmen, you are working with a group of young people and currently working on a project to help elevate their voices and their concerns as well, which kind of, they're not athletes, but it aligns to what Antonio was saying in just sharing what those experiences are, what things that they are needing to feel supported and to be seen in predominantly white spaces. And we know that our schools here, we're trying to feed them into a university at some point, and they're gonna go right back into a situation like this, and they need to have their voices elevated and be heard and be able to articulate and stand on that and be authentic in it. Because even looking at that film and knowing that those individuals were feeling the same way that we feel now, being in spaces where we have to shrink ourselves and or go above and beyond just to be seen, or to have to wear your uniform or something to identify you with a certain credibility. And so what is your take on that, Carmen, and how do you feel that aligns to what Antonio was mentioning right now?
I think it aligns in every single way. I mean, mostly I've been inspired by Lisa from the get-go, so let's put that out there. But a lot of the work she's done have been from you coming into our building, I think from last year and the year before, and just coming in and speaking to the kids, and that for them alone was inspiring. And I think that kind of took off also from when everything happened over the summer. And sorry, I've been drinking tea here because I have a scratchy throat, but everything happening over the summer, which then led to the Black Lives at ICCSD Instagram that went through, where kids were then feeling like they had to, their voices were not being heard in school and in the classrooms and by their teachers and by the people who were meant to be here and take care of them. So that led to them having a space to where their voices were being heard then in the public. And so from there, some teachers also got together. Apparently, we're all Black teachers who got together wanting to find out how do we remediate this? How do we work with this? How do we change the system also so that those voices are heard on a regular basis from elementary through high school for our students? And a couple of different conversations came up, mainly of establishing equity teams or equity committees within our buildings, because none of the buildings have that. But then school started and that pretty much got cut or just got stopped. The conversation stopped happening from where do we go from here and how do we keep on promoting and keep on having students' voices heard. But the problem didn't stop. I mean, the students are still facing issues. I mean, at the beginning of the school year, when we have lesson plans and teachers were doing harmful lessons for students, all of that still happens throughout the year. So even if we're not doing anything to kind of support or show where that change needs to happen or how that change is happening, the harm was still being done. And I think it gets to a certain place to where, when do you stop waiting for something to happen and waiting for somebody to make the change happen, when you just step in and have it happen? And so the students still need those voices heard in this school. They still need to feel like they belong, because my whole thing is, my son is a senior and my son is choosing to study online because it's like, nobody cares for me. I don't belong. I don't feel like I have a space to belong. My friends are not there. If my friends are not there, then why would I want to be there? And so he chose to stay at home and learn from home instead of being in a space with other students, because he didn't feel like he belonged in his space. And so it's one of those things where you think of students go through 4 years of high school and they feel like nothing, and they feel like they're not being appreciated. Their voices are not being heard. They don't have anybody they can count on. Like Lisa said, they don't have teachers of color that they can see and go to for help unless the teachers make themselves known. And so I think my biggest piece here is the work doesn't happen unless one of us make it happen. And so as a teacher of color, fighting to make sure our students' voices are heard and they're being taken into consideration, only because when you see that there are not that many students of color in the building, it's really easy to say, well, it's just some of the students, not everybody. And it's really easy to push it to the side and just to ignore it versus taking action to make change happen. So it's, how do we push it, right? How do we keep on working and making it known and making those voices heard on a daily basis for change to happen, and for teachers to hear that as teachers, we need to continue growing and learning and improving ourselves and how we step up and serve our students, because this is what we're here to do. So I think working with the group of kids I'm working with now is just finding different ways. I've just had to do, like Lisa said, like the backdoor version, the roots of reaching out to one teacher and then the next and then the next and then to admin and then to different people until I finally have a group that says, okay, let's do this. And then reaching out to students and finding ways. So it's taken a couple of years of just that reaching out and pushing and constantly prodding of saying this has to happen for the space to finally be here. But I think this still would not have been able or possible had everything over the summer not had happened. Had the Black Lives Matter as ICCSD not had happened, had the protesting over the summer for students had not happened, had it not been so public, I still think we'll be fighting, right, to get students to be heard and get the message across that we have a problem in our schools of students suffering or with racial issues every single day. And something needs to happen to make that problem public or make that problem heard for everybody to then do something about it. So the route we're going right now is reintroducing the idea of creating equity teams in the buildings, making sure that our students are part of that so their voices are heard, and then also trying to do something for the students' voices to be heard in school and be heard by teachers, so that teachers can see how our actions on a daily basis are harmful to our students. And sometimes it's just the silence of it. So when teacher says, well, I really don't know how to have a conversation about race, but you hear other students making racial comments in class and you do nothing and you stay silent to that because you're so uncomfortable about how to address it, is harmful. So the students still see that as a harmful act because it is, and they're still affected by it. And so making sure that teachers are aware of that. And if they don't know how to have those conversations, provide support to do it, and create circles that teachers can then be able to have these conversations in circles with students to be able to talk about what's going on. And so more of those restorative conversations of harm happening, and then how do we restore a relationship and restore a place of belonging, and a place of trust. And so, but it's a lot of work, and half the time you feel like you're the only one doing it, but it is a lot of work.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments that they want to say? I want to give time for our panelists to have some closing remarks. And so if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask them. Don't be shy. All right, so no more questions. Panelists, do you have any closing remarks? Is there anything that we could do differently? Any ways we can continue the conversation later down the road? Lisa, I'm with you 100% saying that we need to elevate Black voices all year, and especially Black women for March, but it should not be just limited to 1 month, but definitely all year. And there's a lot that we still don't know and things that we still need to learn and really dive deep into the background of what we're trying to articulate and share and get our young people motivated to do more, because their voices do need to be elevated in this. And as we can see, it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, we're still kind of going through the same struggles. And we need to find ways to be able to support whatever work is being done, whether it's at the university in the athletics department or at the library rec center or UAY or just Liberty, or Lisa, you as a PhD student, how can we be more supportive of? So if either of you have closing remarks, now you can go ahead. Y'all can flip a coin. Who wants to go first?
You can go, Lisa.
Thank you, Antonio. I think the work is year round, the work that Jackie Robinson did and is so important, but it's also like Mr. Brunker said, he sacrificed his well-being to be for what? For integration of, because he was well-mannered and well-tempered. I think that we have to move away from tokenizing Black folks and trying to identify one and lifting them up and not recognizing the erasure that does to other folks, like people in the Negro Leagues and the Satchel Pages and all of the many players who played better than Jackie Robinson, right? I think that there's so much work to do. It's just figuring out what your lane is. And Carmen talks a lot about, like education. And I think that we just have to figure out what our lane is and go for that. We need to value Black folks' experiences and honor their expertise and their time. And we have to do the work, right? Like Antonio said, we have to read and do things, but we also need to think about the best ways to apply that knowledge in support of Black and Indigenous people of color. What do you think, Antonio?
Yes, all of that, per usual. First off, thank you for having me. It's been great. I was kind of nervous. I speak in front of a lot of people and I perform in front of a lot of people, but I don't know, something about speaking, I get kind of nervous. But yes, thank you again for inviting me here. I really appreciated it. And I just want to say a few things that I'd like to share is just, a lot of the work that we're doing is, like I said, it's exhausting. It's powerful, it's needed. And like you said, Lisa, like, you know, there are so many different lanes and avenues, and like kind of just like trying to like narrow down which lane we want to navigate through, but like also being mindful that like while there are so many lanes that we can navigate through, just like pacing ourselves and just like being mindful so that we don't end up like Jackie Robinson and like just like internally deteriorating ourselves psychologically and mentally, and it's just like draining us to the point that we don't have the capacity to even continue moving forward, you know. So just like being mindful of where we're going, and also to just like we've come a long way. We still have a lot of work to do, obviously, but just being patient with our progress and just just being patient with our progress, even if that progress is incremental, you know. We want to jump from 3 to 10, but like, you know, it might be from 3 to 3.5 or 3 to 4, but just like being mindful about where we are, and just know as long as the needle's moving, you know, and the work's being done, then can't ask much more of that. Just being mindful and cognizant of our well-being. I'm all about mental health, especially Black mental health. I actually tweeted the other day about like basically just having no shame about wanting to discuss like mental health concerns or issues as a Black individual, because that's something that is not talked about and kind of swept under the rug in the Black community. So just like bringing awareness to that. Sorry, that was totally random. I don't know how I got there, but yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I'll drop my email chat in case anyone would ever like to reach out and connect, or, you know, I love talking to people and networking.
Make sure you get paid next time.
Well, we would love to pay him, but I don't know how that works with student athletes. So I want him to stay part of the track team. You know, for the little coins that he would get. So no, we definitely appreciate you and your time, and you as well, Lisa, for, you know, always coming. It's always such a pleasure to learn more and to have these discussions. I don't think we have them enough, or often enough, I should say. So I really definitely appreciate you all. I appreciate everyone that, you know, chimed in tonight and was a part of this conversation, and definitely for Victoria partnering to present this through the Iowa City Public Library as well. I do think it's important that we continue these conversations and highlight the contributions that Black people have made to American history, not just only in sports, but in every aspect. And so we need to do more of that. And I think we can find ways to do that. So I definitely appreciate all of you. And for those who are on, we will make sure that we get your registration information. Sorry if my thing is breaking up, but we'll make sure that you get your swim pass cards as well, your punch card for attending. Thanks. All right, anything else you want to add, Victoria?
Just reiterate what you said. Thank you so much to the panelists' expertise and for sharing, for our audience, for asking questions and for sharing, and to this being one of many conversations that we have in the future.